Honestly, I was kind of expecting it. Surprised it hadn't happened earlier, really. The old man had been fighting off heart trouble for years, and it finally got the best of him. The hospital that he passed away at called me in to confirm who he was, and the funeral arrangements had already been taken care of in his will. Now all there was to do was pack up his house. I know, it seems kind of cold for me to talk about him like this. He was my father after all. Truth is, he wasn't much of a father other than a name. He was constantly pouring himself into his work, almost never home. And when he was distant or asleep, usually passing out on the couch by noon on his days off. He didn't talk about his work much, said that it was classified. I just know that he worked in some lab, studying quantum something or other. I didn't hold any of that against him at first, not until I was 14, when I got home from school and found my mother collapsed in the kitchen. I had tried shaking her and doing chest compressions, anything that may bring her back, but she was cold to the touch already when I had found her. Her eyes had the white film over them that death brings, and she was stiff, not easily moved. I called Dad 3 times with no answer, before I finally gave up and I called 911 to report what had happened. When they got her in for autopsy, it was discovered that she had an aneurysm. Completely random, no way to predict or stop it. A nurse consoled me at the hospital as they wheeled her body into the morgue. They tried to call my dad too, but had as much luck as me. He finally showed up 2 days later, looking like he had been through a bender that would make Charlie Sheen jealous. He mumbled something about being sorry and sleepwalked through the funeral. After that, it was business as usual, with me fending for myself while he worked. Naturally, I got away from there as soon as possible. I went off to a good college, got a scholarship and a full ride through, and am currently finishing up my doctorate degree. Things have been stressful. It's a doctorate, I don't know what I had expected, but I'm managing. I made the arrangements with my professors to take a couple of weeks off of class while I closed everything out back home, and here we are now. Stepping back into my childhood home was surprising, really. The place looked immaculate, just a small layer of dust on everything. It almost looked like he hadn't come back home since I left 8 years ago. Hell, he probably hadn't. Probably just stayed at the lab and crashed on a bench or something when he was tired. At least this would make packing up and cleaning easy. I got to work, cleaning out the kitchen first, and then slowly making my way further into the house. His bedroom was the last to go, and I took a deep breath as I entered. There was not a single thing out of place. The same bed, dresser, and lamp that he had had since I was born, still in the same place after all these years. The only thing that was strange was the box sitting on his bed. I noticed there was writing on top as I moved towards it, making it out to say, "For Mark," as I drew closer. So this bastard couldn't call or write for 8 years after I left home, but he could leave a box sitting here, completely sealed before he goes through heart failure. I felt a small tinge of rage build up in my chest, hot fire pushing up through my throat. God, the last thing I needed was for my stress ulcers to start up during all of this. I grabbed the box cutter from the kitchen table and I sat down on the bed. The box was heavy, packed full but perfectly stacked to fill out every inch of space. What the hell could he have left after all this time? Upon opening the flaps of cardboard, I saw stacks upon stacks of old VHS tapes. Each one was meticulously labeled with a name, date, and a 5-digit number underneath that. On the top of all of it was a letter from my dad. "Mark, I just want to tell you how sorry I am. There's no excuse that I can make. Nothing I can say will take back how awful I've been, but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. I was absorbed in my work until your mother died. I didn't even think of being part of this family. Once she was gone, it just hurt too much to be here. And so, I lost myself even further in my work, trying to make sense of everything that had happened and what had yet to happen. I wanted to tell your mother how sorry I was as well. There are things I've never been able to tell you. My work, most of my life, they've been kept secrets from those that I love most. You see, Mark, I work for something called The Collective. We monitor events out of the ordinary and try to keep them from happening again. What this mostly includes is keeping an eye on parallel universes, making sure the walls between our world and theirs stay intact. I thought I was pouring myself into my work to protect you from these things, Mark. There are creatures beyond our imagination that have come to our world from others, things only some of us can see without help. This is my research. Sure, it isn't quite everything, but it's what I could manage to get out of the lab. For the past 30 years, I've been monitoring other worlds for apocalyptic events, hoping to study what happens there in order to help prevent such an event here. Each of these tapes contain an emergency broadcast or some other bulletin from a now extinct world, as well as a detailed report on what had happened. There's a lot of technical speak for how we got these, but I'll leave that for another time or later. With all that said, please continue my work. Help to ensure the survival of our world. I won't make you do this, but I ask with everything left in me. I leave this box of tapes, some horrifying, some tragic, and to ask you that you look through them. See if you can find patterns that I haven't. When you've decided you want to do this and research more, find the collective, speak with the cognizant. They'll be waiting for you. I love you, son. I'm sorry. Dad. I couldn't believe any of this. Had he been struggling with dementia before he died? Was he schizophrenic? God, I couldn't believe I was actually about to watch one of these tapes. I dug out our old VCR from storage and I plugged it up into the TV, grabbing the first tape off the top of the stack. Inside the sleeve with the tape was an envelope containing a few slips of paper. I put the video in, sat down on the floor and started looking over the report. 12/17/1975. Spider Baby. Earth 02-258. Broadcast interrupted by Cognizant enhanced airwaves during late night movie hour on local broadcast television. Cognizant on duty was Ralph, who said that during interdimensional surveillance, he noticed a bright flash around 10:17 p.m., after which a phenomena began. Cognizant reported that multitudes of people began materializing in the streets. Subjects appear to be human, but do not speak or communicate in any human manner. Cognizant reports that subjects look ranged from preteen children to senior citizens of both genders. Subjects began by approaching people on the street. When approached, they will stand in front of native humans and study them, before multi-jointed appendages jut from their backs of the subjects, impaling the humans in question. Once they have impaled the humans, they then begin to absorb them slowly, while the victim is still alive. Cognizant quickly linked with Collective of the victim world, warning them of the situation. Emergency broadcast was sent out not long after that. Cognizant continued recon, noting that once these streets were cleared, the subjects began knocking on doors and feeding on anyone that opened their door. This continued for hours after. Cognizant eventually had to be forcefully removed from recon due to the mental toll of seeing unprecedented death. Second Cognizant, Agatha, then took over. Noticed that as the creatures absorbed more humans, the variety of people they appeared as grew. Made sure to note one house in particular, where a toddler-aged girl knocked on the door. and then proceeded to grow multiple limbs, much like those of an arachnid, and absorb a family of 4 on its own. As these subjects absorbed more and more victims, they began to grow and merge into a seeming collective. Cognizant noted that creatures operated on a hive mind, with one singular goal of feeding and merging. Cognizant continued to watch events unfold, switching out in shifts for 5 days until the subjects had fed enough. Once this was done, all subjects vanished, appearing at a point above Central America and merging into one over the course of 5 hours. Once they had merged, the subject showed its true form. Cognizant described it as still humanoid, though with armor plating like that of an arthropod, with human limbs and 6 more segmented legs rising from the spinal area. Creature is reported to have large mandibles, as well as 4 red eyes. Creature pierced the earth below it with all 6 segmented limbs, each one landed in a different area of North and South America. From here, the creature nested for 4 more days, curling its main body into a tight ball, while these segmented limbs held it up. Humanity of this respective Earth attempted to fight back, but nothing was able to break the plating. Midway through the 4th day, it was determined the creature was feeding on the energy of the Earth. Fault lines began to appear from the spot each limb landed, and move out from there. Cognizant reported the patterns of spiderwebs made by the lines. At the end of the 4 days, the Earth was in a serious drought, with ocean levels dropping by nearly 400 feet. Finally, the planet shattered in on itself, leaving segments of broken Earth swirling in the atmosphere where a whole planet once stood. Cognizant, Agatha, and Ralph are currently on leave and on suicide watch due to high mental strain. We'll update as more info becomes available. Update 1/8/1976. Ralph found dead in dormitory this morning. Bashed his head against the dorm wall until unconscious. Brain trauma was too much for revival. Agatha had covered her dormitory walls in paintings of large arachnids. There is a black widow spider nested in the corner of her room. Upon the janitor attempting to remove the spider, Agatha attacked him, claiming that he would anger the arachnid god. Jesus Christ. I couldn't believe what I had just seen or read. I knew the movie. It was Spider Baby, an old B horror from the 60s. But halfway through, the film This Emergency Alert broadcast came up, telling everyone to stay indoors and to not answer any knocks on their door. Maybe Dad wasn't crazy. Maybe he's just messing with me from the afterlife and he edited these himself. Maybe I'm the crazy one, and I worked myself into a freaking breakdown this semester. I'm going to transfer the warning part of the video over to digital and try to upload it. Maybe that'll help me make sense of all of this. I don't know if I want to watch any more of these tapes, but I feel like I have to. There's gotta be some kind of thread linking everything. There must be some way to stop these events from happening here. I transferred the video. Here it is. I'm going to try to go through the rest of these tapes in the next few months, but I think I'll need to take it slow. My head is spinning as is. Take care, everyone, and I'll keep you updated. I'm going to be honest right off the bat with everyone. I didn't want to make this update. I don't want to keep this up. I want to destroy these goddamn tapes and lobotomize myself. I want to forget any of this ever happened. I want to forget that I ever had a father. I've gone through a few more of the tapes as well as the case files contained with them. Some were uneventful, just a news broadcast or a late-night film with a stock emergency broadcast system message. One warned of an impending meteor strike and then went to static. One just cut off in the middle of an old cartoon. No message or anything. It turns out that one was a universe where a black hole suddenly formed somewhere between Mercury and Venus, collapsing the entire solar system in fractions of a second. No pain, no mess. Just something to nothing. All of this, so it's taking a toll. Looking at all of this death and destruction, all of these untold horrors that lurk out there in the world, there has to be something out there to counterbalance this. For every world that ends violently, there has to be some world where they found the cure for cancer or ended world hunger, right? God, I hope so. Otherwise, what I have here is a box full of nihilism and analog tape. I've been doing a little more research into what Dad said in his letter as well. These cognizants, that's what they keep getting referred to as anyway. They can apparently see into other dimensions and see interdimensional beings in our own world. Apparently on occasion, the walls between realities will tear and things will slip through. In most of the reports I've seen, they're referred to as aberrations. Dad has a couple of files in here about a near-apocalyptic event months ago, caused by some tearing into our world. I'm going to transcribe a couple more of the case files now. I tried my best to get the tapes transferred over to digital, but some of them are so old that they didn't make it. The ones I did get were attached to old movie reruns on late-night TV again. Night of the Living Dead and Carnival of Souls. At least the other realities still have good movies, I guess. 10/18/1977. Case: Night of the Living Dead. Earth 24-601. Cognizant on duty today is Agatha, for the most part recovered from her trauma earlier this year. Still protects whatever spider she can find, but has managed to let us take the brown recluses to a safe area. She does not realize that this entails Robin throwing them in the incinerator. Tuned universal surveillance over to Earth 24-601, where Agatha said tensions between the United States and Communist Russia were highly elevated. Also mentioned that Vietnam was still ongoing as well, with much higher casualties to American troops as well as deployment of a new uranium-based biological weapon, codenamed Agent Green. The American military, desiring to bring a swift and decisive end to the Vietnam conflict, as well as to intimidate potential enemies, decided to drop a hydrogen bomb on Hy So Mi City. The devastation of the blast is immeasurable, leveling the entire city as well as most of the surrounding countryside. An unintended effect soon follows. However, that will bring about the end. The nuclear capability of the hydrogen bomb reacts with compounds in Agent Green that have been sprayed throughout the Vietnamese jungle. This causes any deceased that were not immediately evaporated by the blast to begin to mutate, rising from the dead into a reanimated state. Mutations typically consisted of grotesque boils growing on exposed patches of skin, extra teeth growing on arms, legs, and in a few observed cases, stomachs of the deceased. Subjects typically wandered aimlessly once reanimated, roaming the countryside and ruins of the city until they came in contact with anyone still living. Upon seeing a living being, they would grow into a frenzy with the singular goal of attacking and capturing the live victim, upon which they would pull them in close, lacerating skin with the exposed teeth and then popping the boils, allowing the pus to seep into the victim. This in turn infected the living victim, who would first die a slow, painful death, much like that observed in victims of radiation poisoning after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They would begin the mutations while still living, often screaming in pain while doing so. Typical time to expire was 1 week after initial infection. The infection spread slowly through Vietnam, mostly among remnants of guerrilla fighters at first, and then eventually through to US troops that were still stationed along the beaches and in the jungles. Military leadership initially did not take reports of infection seriously, leading to higher rates of infection in the early days of the outbreak. Infection spread to neighboring countries after approximately 2 weeks, with infected individuals seemingly acting as a hive mind after gathering enough numbers. They would swarm cities in what appeared to be coordinated waves, attacking and infecting large groups of people, and then retreating before mounting another attack hours later. This ensured that the living were slowly picked off, with the infection spreading exponentially as more and more joined the subjects' ranks. Overseas transmission was accomplished by infected walking into the ocean. They did not appear to require respiration of any kind. Thus, they were able to walk across the ocean floor, and although at a slow rate, eventually move into other countries across bodies of water. Once on land, they would then seek out the nearest living being and begin the cycle. Humanity attempted multiple methods of killing the subjects, though none were shown to work. While gunshots to the head appeared to stop them temporarily, the subjects' bodies seemed to allow mutations which moved slower, more rudimentary brains to other parts of the body, thus allowing basic survival and motor functions even with separation of the head. The only method found for complete and total destruction of the subject was burning to ash. The subject arrived in mainland America within 3 weeks of the first infection in Vietnam. Any word of the disease had been suppressed initially, with American troops and citizens being told that the infected were victims of a communist biological weapon. This facade was kept up in order for America to appear blameless in the use of biological and nuclear warfare, whereas meanwhile most other countries across mainland Europe and Asia were also dealing with their own outbreaks of the infection. Subjects spread across more of the earth in a matter of weeks, attacking and infecting anyone unfortunate enough to cross paths with carriers of the pathogen. Infected numbers grew exponentially in the first few days, soon outnumbering humans at 10 to 1. The affected then began coordinated attacks on any surviving communities, systematically rooting out and turning any humans found. In a desperate final bid at eradicating the disease, the American military conducted bombing raids. Nuclear arms were dropped on hordes of infected as they traveled in packs. These attacks decimated a large amount of the infected population, but it had unintended effects on those not destroyed by the initial blast. The radiation only strengthened the creatures, turning them into walking nuclear reactors. This in turn scorched any ground they came across, leaving fallout and infection in their wake. This also ensured that any human within range of subjects became infected simply through proximity. Agatha notes 2 months after infection, approximately 10,000 healthy humans are left on Earth. Most of them have been forced to adapt a nomadic lifestyle, constantly staying on the move to avoid roving groups of the infected. Cognizant will continue to monitor and update on the situation. Update 3/20/1978. Agatha reports 300 survivors remain, most having lost any hope to continue. Radiation is spread into most of the world's water supply, and storm systems spread nuclear fallout across the Earth. Agatha reported that the remaining humans are divided across the planet, with most believing they are the last remaining alive. The infected are still hunting, using their hive mind to develop a network across the world to find survivors. Update 4/7/1978. Agatha reports that the final human has been killed, opting to die by gunshot to the head instead of from the encroaching infected. We'll continue to monitor Dimension for any sign of anomaly and potential aberrations, as well as research for any potential countermeasures in the events of aberration. I still can't believe any of this. It's so insane. How could Dad see all of this, deal with all of this, and not go insane? No wonder he rarely came home. Facing these horrors had to change him. Until now, I've just been taking tapes off the top of the stack in the box and going on by one. I've gone through 3 layers of what I estimate to be about 10 layers. And this is the point where I found something new. There was a large envelope, almost filled to bursting with papers. I opened it and I slid the pile out onto the floor. On top was another letter from Dad. Mark, I know what you've seen so far has been a lot to take in. These tapes, the case files, everything that's been in this box. I know I didn't sleep for weeks after being taken into the collective. I never knew there could be such terrors. Now, I'm honestly just happy to die and not have to worry about any of this. If there's a heaven or hell, it can't be as bad as the things that I've seen. What's enclosed in this envelope is twofold. There is a brief history of the collective. This entails the founding, how long we've known about the parallel worlds, the cognizants, and a brief history of who's who in the organization. You'll probably be surprised by the amount of famous historical figures that were more special than they had let on. The second part is an archive of high-casualty aberrations that have crossed into our world. Many events throughout history were given a natural explanation, because the real reasons were far too much for ordinary humans to handle. There are things you'll learn here that will scare you, and honestly they should. Our world is not safe. No world is. Here is where I leave you. Again, I'm so sorry. Even now, as I write this letter, I'm tempted to take it all and burn it. Part of me wants you to continue living in ignorance, not knowing the horrors that lurk out in the world. The father in me wants to protect you. The scientist in me, though, knows that this research needs to continue. Someone has to do it, and I trusted more to someone that I know was smart enough to see the connections that I could not. I love you, Dad. There is a case file along with an old newspaper clipping kept in a plastic sleeve. The paper was yellowed, and the print on it was faded to nearly nothing. I could see the edges disintegrating in the plastic. The headline read, "Great Fire Devastates Chicago." There is a case file attached. The Great Chicago Fire. Cognizant Martin Ford and his partner were in the city of Chicago on their annual rounds when an aberration appeared in the city. Ford describes the being as being humanoid, but made of pure flame, burning white hot. Ford said he attempted to make contact with the creature, asking it of its intentions on our world, and where it came from. The creature reportedly appeared uncaring of Ford's presence, instead looking around before finally touching the nearest building, setting it ablaze. Ford began to attempt to chase the aberration, trying to force it back through the dimensional tear that it came from. The creature did not acknowledge, instead continuing to move along the city streets, setting buildings afire as it went. Ford, thinking resourcefully, began to find whatever water he could around their immediate vicinity, dousing the aberration and beginning to force it towards Lake Michigan. Although they were moving the creature quickly towards the water, the fire continued to spread wherever it went. Teams of local firefighters scrambled immediately to fight the blaze. Finally, after a long struggle, the creature was cornered at the end of the port on Lake Michigan. In a heroic sacrifice, Ford's partner, Ezra Jennings, threw himself at the creature using Ford as his sight guide. Upon grabbing the aberration, he threw both it and himself into the lake, immediately killing the creature. Ford dove in after him, noting the near boiling temperature of the water as he dragged Jennings' body back to shore. Jennings' burns were beyond repair, and he expired 7 hours after the aberration was destroyed. Let it be known that Ezra Jennings is receiving the highest accommodations the collective can give, as well as a hefty retirement sum being paid to his widow and family for future generations. He will also be memorialized in Collective HQ and archives as one of our most honored members. This is why my dad gave me these files. These are things to watch out for, things that nobody else can see. Hell, I can't even see them. I'm combing through whatever files I can. I may transcribe some if I think it's important. Some may deserve to stay as they are though. These things shouldn't be known. I'm torn if I should keep sharing these things. I don't want other people to know about these horrors. I barely slept in days, thinking that at any moment some cosmic terror could break through and destroy us, rending our minds into fragments. There'd be nothing we could do. I need to think on this. There's a lot left to go through, but I may just stop here. I may do what my dad couldn't and burn it. Maybe check myself in somewhere, or have a drink or 20 until I can forget. I keep hoping that I'll wake up. Find out Dad was really just your normal, everyday, absentee father. Maybe Mom was still alive, and I've dreamed the past decade of trauma. If I'm lucky, I'm actually dying, and this is all just the last illusions as my brain fires off every synapse until I die. Here we are though. I'm alive, you're alive. Who knows how long we'll stay that way. This will be my last update, at least for a while. I'm giving up on the tapes. The death and destruction, it's just too much. After this is uploaded, I'm going to set off and try to find the collective. I found something, a pattern. I'm afraid something big is about to happen. Something awful. I've gone through more videos, some worse than others. There were more that were the typical apocalypse stuff that everyone expects. Earth's sun goes supernova. Biological and germ warfare kills the world. One was gone in an instant due to an accident at the Large Hadron Collider. The damn thing went off and took half the Earth with it, splitting the globe right down the middle and transporting one half just over 2 miles away from where it had started. Naturally, this was enough to cause instant death to the entire world due to gravitational shift. This last one though, I think it's literally hell. Hell coming to Earth and tearing our world apart for its own needs. I can only hope that it stays in that dimension, and we don't have a hell of our own. So, here's the case file with it. I managed to get the video transferred over as well though, with a few minor hiccups that came along with it. The tape wasn't in great shape, so this one is a bit more shaky than normal. After you read it, say a prayer. Our world will need it. Case, Carnival of Souls, 10/2/1987. Earth designation, 00-666. Cognizant on duty today is Sun. Tune to the late night broadcast of Carnival of Souls on a local public access channel for Earth of U666. Dimensional analysis and energy reports suggest a major cataclysmic event soon to take place. Current state of this Earth is much like our own, with the exception that disco never happened and heavy metal came to be much sooner. As such, this Earth has been experiencing their own version of the Satanic Panic since approximately 1977. In response to this, there has been a much greater focus on purging the nation of anything deemed evil. Book burnings and film burnings are rampant, with those caught possessing anything deemed unholy punished with torture and lengthy prison sentences. As such, a radical cult of Satanism has sprung up in protest. According to Sun, said cult was conducting an open protest at Capitol Hill, in which a pentagram was drawn on the outside courtyard. Worshippers then gathered around the symbol, chanting in what appeared to be Latin. 2 minutes into the chant, they were attacked by riot police wielding shields and batons, who immediately began brutalizing the group. At least 3 protesters were killed and several wounded. Sun reports that the blood spilled during the encounter was absorbed by the pentagram, seemingly fueling a glowing light which began to emanate from the symbol. Cracks began to spread outward from it, eventually growing into fissures, which opened underneath the group of protesters and counter-protesters caught nearby. These fissures reportedly sprang open very suddenly, not allowing anyone to escape. Fire was said to flow from the cracks as more and more humans were taken. The fissures closed after 10 minutes, leaving nearly no trace of being there. Violence began to resume amongst the gathered humans, with people from both sides attacking anyone and everyone within reach. Sun noted that the first ones to begin attacking were those that had been injured in the initial chaos, and those that were injured by them in the ensuing brawl then began to attack others, after freezing and convulsing for a moment. The brawl continued moving outward from there, with more and more humans becoming violent as they expanded to the outskirts of the city. By that evening, most of the DC area was in a full-blown riot. Sun noted that some who were attacked and hurt were not being overtaken as others have, depending on the severity of the injuries. Those attacking seemed to be focused on simply drawing blood, and anyone hurt beyond superficial wounds such as with broken bones or gaping wounds were simply left to bleed out or killed outright. Cases were noted of some of these victims being crucified on light poles, or dismembered and arranged in occult patterns by the attacking group. As the sun set over DC, the attackers began to bloom outward to the surrounding areas, aiming to move into surrounding cities. Smaller groups were left behind to roam the streets and weed out what humans were left in the capital. These roving gangs seemed more intent on terrorizing and slaughtering the survivors than turning them to their cause, frequently standing outside and taunting them before dragging them from their homes and brutally murdering anyone found. Sun was relieved of duty by trainee Cognizant Alexander the next morning due to shock. Sun had been monitoring the outer cities around the capital as these subjects spread, and when deciding to check back on DC after a few hours. It should be noted here that Sun is currently 6 months pregnant with her first child. Upon looking back, she was greeted by the sight of multiple dead in the streets, homes painted red with blood, and any children and infants that had been found cut open and thrown over power lines between homes. Alexander resumed surveillance, noting that subjects had moved into the tri-state area and were commandeering cars, planes, and other vehicles in order to go further. The subjects referred to humanity as filth, frequently claiming to be from hell, and referring to one another as fallen. These descriptions coincide with the biblical description of demonic entities. After the second day, they had successfully taken the eastern seaboard and begun moving west across the United States. Some began commandeering aircraft and boats to move into other countries, while others crossed the Canadian border and began work there. Fallen that were moving west were noted to begin losing interest and appearing to become bored with how the operation was going. As such, they began disguising themselves as authority figures and other people in power in order to fool victims before killing them. It should be noted that across the world, more humans were becoming possessed at random, seemingly tied to wounds in the skin and blood being spilled. Though unconfirmed, there is belief that some world leaders were taken before anyone else in their country, in a mass operation to let blood from citizens and perform acts of aggression against other countries, attempting to start war. Some possessed were noted to eat parts of victims if they were deemed to be beyond saving. They did not seem to do this for any nourishment, but simply for pleasure and to defile. Multiple fallen were noted as recognizing each other in their human hosts, and speaking of how there were trillions of others still waiting to get a human host. 1 week from the initial riot, most countries are in complete disarray. There are less than 10 million living humans on Earth scattered across most countries. At some point, a beast rises from the Atlantic Ocean, fitting the biblical description of having 7 heads. The creature glowed with an unholy black flame wafting from it, filling an immediate area with the smell of rot and sulfur. The beast stood tall, with its lower extremities almost reaching the lower atmospheric clouds. The beast was welcomed to shore near the Middle East by a tall, thin man, who at first glance appeared as an attractive woman or man, depending on the viewer, but upon a longer look, became a rotting corpse. Once they were united, the harlot climbed to the top of the beast, proceeding to perform various sexual acts for the beast, to see as it spewed fire and brimstone, covering the earth and shearing demons. The world became a hellscape of fire and death, with possessed humans shredding their skin and revealing the true form of the demons. Reptilian creatures with cloven hooves, large twisted horns, and flames bursting forth from every orifice. Earth 00-666 was deemed as a loss 9 days after initial breach, with any humans left alive at the time being captured and tortured until death. Update 10/10/1987. Son has suffered a miscarriage. Update 10/15/1987. Alexander has requested a leave of absence in order to attend a seminary with a Catholic church. Without fail. Who's to say that ours won't be next? I need to find them, this collective. They have to have a map or something showing where these universes were in relation to ours. If I'm right, then we're due for an apocalyptic event soon, assuming it hasn't already started. I dumped everything out of the box finally. There is a paper on the bottom with an address. Somewhere in southern Georgia. Looks like the middle of nowhere. I'm heading out tomorrow. Until then, I'm leaving the papers and tapes here. Once I've spoken to them, I'm going to attempt to find some more information and hopefully find a way to prevent whatever messed up thing may happen to our world. Eventually, I'll try to scan everything in and upload it. These things have to be known. People need to see what's really happening in our world and be better equipped to fight it. I'll set up a site to dump all the info on when I finally can. In the meantime, I need to rest and make some final preparations. I don't know if this was what Dad had in mind. Me telling the world about the collective and the terrors that lurk beyond our own world. But I hope he's proud. He may not have been there for me or my mom, but at least he was trying to save and protect us in his own weird way. I'm going to finish this. For him. Love you, Dad.
Mr. Fisher was always a hot-headed one. In a good way, of course. He was one of those teachers that would playfully talk smack to all the stupid teenagers in the class, getting a good laugh out of all of us. And he was also one of those teachers that was excellent at their job. Mr. Fisher's scholastic passion was American literature, and oh boy, he knew American literature. I can't even count the number of times he would rant about J.D. Salinger or Ernest Hemingway relentlessly, and then just stop talking and zone out because he would ponder the greatness of their work in his silent bubble. We would just watch him sulk in his episode of awkward silence and fiery admiration for his idols. Don't get me wrong. Unlike most of the teachers in the school that didn't give a damn about our educational process, he cared excessively. He would go out of his way and legitimately connect with us individually, just so he could crack the code of our developing minds and learn the secrets to how he can get us to pay attention in his class. He was a great teacher, and not to be bold, but I was a great student. I was his favourite student. Whenever he would ask the class for an answer, and he never saw any hands go up, he would just put me on the hot seat. With no problem at all, I would answer him every time. There were even times when he would walk up to my desk, put his hand on my shoulder, and commemorate me. Right in the middle of the damn class session. Now, at the time, it was a bit much, yes, but I wasn't just going to deny his request for a correct answer. The only time that I was ever concerned with in his class was that he made everything super hard. We would have to study things that we never even got close to becoming attached to in class. The tests were impossible, his homework assignments were too long, to the brink of impossibility, and his grading system was complete BS. His damn grading system. He would grade all assignments, all quizzes, all tests on an entire class average. So, whenever there was a majority of below 50% scores, that's what the entire class as a unit would get. He believed this tactic was brutally fair. He claimed that if we lacked the ability to work with each other as a class and to learn as a class as a whole, then we should all burn for each other's inability to learn. He wanted all of us to work together. But there was always a barrier between all of the drama and all of the awkward teenage communicational blocks that would prevent each and every one of us for clicking with each other. He had 6 high school classes in the school year. We were his least successful one, and he was never afraid to announce that. He was always proud to make all of us feel like a waste of his time, and ours. Okay, now I feel like I'm just rambling. The main point of this story is his grading system, and the day Fisher went absolutely crazy in class. It was 2 weeks before the end of the school year. We were all anticipating the changes of the weather and the final day. We were so excited that we even started communicating with each other. All classmates were just clicking. Summer fever was taking the entire student population by storm, and we were loving it. Mr. Fisher wasn't. This was the day we were supposed to get our tests on Catcher in the Rye back, and as a class average, we were expecting to flunk this. We all loved the novel. It was one of those novels where most of the classmates even told Fisher that they can connect to the main protagonist. The story itself was well written and beautifully put together, but that didn't mean Fisher would make the test even remotely easy. As a class average, failed. I noticed the pain in Fisher's face as he was handing all of us our papers back. I knew some volcanic eruption of painful lecturing was coming. I was wrong. I was totally and completely false. Fisher walked up to the door and locked it. I noticed this action along with several other puzzled classmates. He then walked to his desk, pulled out a hammer from a cabinet, and whacked it on the desk. "All of you, stay after class." My face got warm and my heart dropped to my groin. I looked at the clock from the corner of my eye and noticed that there were 40 minutes in class left. He walked down each student row, flicked a student's ear, and announced their class average grade letter. Flick. E. Flick. E. Flick. E. He did this until he approached me. He messed up my hair and softly said, A. I started sweating. My teeth were clenched with fear and my hands were shaking underneath my ass. I sit to my hands as a nervous habit. My desk is right in front of his, so right from my desk he jumped on his and stood up on it. He then shut the blinds on the window next to his desk and flicked the light switch. The room was a shade of dark blue now, only illuminated by his computer screen and the weak ray of sunlight piercing the blind on the window. 36 minutes until lunch, 1 more week until final exams, 2 more weeks until summer. We were all frozen. He had us in the palm of his hand. Let's see what you all know. Final exams start now. He bellowed the now and made it echo and radiate throughout the room. He grabbed the handle of his hammer and walked away from his desk, the blunt side of it scraping against his wooden desk. My fellow classmate, Justin, from across the room, didn't take this body language with peace. He should have just sat there. He should have stayed still. Instead, he spotted the hammer in his hands and slowly began to rise out of his desk while looking Fisher right in the eyes. Justin, take your seat. Mr. Fisher, I don't know if I want to do that. He said something along the lines of that. I don't remember, but whatever he said, Fisher would not let that fly past him. He slowly began to approach him. He taunted him by lightly tapping the hammer against his chalkboard. He did this for several moments until he stopped at the edge of the board, and then drove the hammer into the black surface. Justin literally collapsed onto his seat, and his hands were shaking all over the place. Mr. Fisher then ran to his desk, whacked the hammer next to his shaking hands. Justin placed his hands on his lap and looked down at the floor. All of the students started losing their minds. They all started to get out of their desks and walk towards the door, but Mr. Fisher had one thing that could keep all of us in our desks. That hammer. And he used it on Justin. This is where things get out of hand. He swung the hammer full force at Justin's head. The force was so powerful that it made Justin fly into the bookshelf on his left. He hit the floor hard afterwards, and I remember seeing his body quiver and shake from the pain. This is where the students stopped what they were doing and just stayed quiet. Now, in regards to all the loud banging from the hammer, you may be wondering why no one heard it. Well, let's see. His classroom was behind the gymnasium, and the gymnasium was practically near the end of the school building, and physical education was not in session. Therefore, making the rest of the school faculty completely oblivious to the fact that Fisher was rampant in his classroom with a hammer. He started smacking the hammer on Justin's desk like a gavel, and then he gestured all of the students to get back in their desks. Despite all of the trauma getting pushed into these kids' brains, they still remained obedient. Despite all the hysterical students with tears streaming down their faces, they finally gave Fisher what he always wanted: attention, obedience, organization. Nancy, start of the semester, what do we read? Nancy's posture shot up into defense and fear. He started raising his voice and stretching out his words to mess with her head. Nancy, pay attention. What do we read at the start of the semester? His head would tilt side by side with each syllable. He was toying with her completely. And then his face got red. The veins in his neck started bulging. The lack of verbal communication from Nancy made him snap into another episode of violent eruption. He growled, grabbed Nancy by her hair, and threw her at the chalkboard. She kept trying to crawl away from the front of the room, but he kept kicking her back onto the wall. She was bawling her eyes out. That's when he pointed at me. He picked her up and put her in a headlock. She was struggling, but it was pointless. He had her neck in one arm, and the other arm was extended towards me. "McGrady, what did we read at the start of the semester, eh?" I was stuttering. I was turning into a broken record. I just couldn't give him an answer. I was panicking, and my mind was at a blank. He released her neck, grabbed her by the hair again, and started slamming her face into the board. "McGrady, what did we read at the start of the semester?" He wanted me to forget the answer. He wanted to toy with me. "Save her, McGrady. You can do it." That's when the light bulb shot out of my brain. I sprang into action. "Death of a Pig" by E.B. White. What was that? "Death of a Pig" by E.B. White. Fisher began to loosen his grip, and the expression on his face was completely blank. Absolutely empty. I had him right where I wanted him. And then he let out a deep sigh until an evil smirk stretched across his face. And that's when he opened his mouth slowly and said, "The Minister's Black Veil" by Nathaniel Hawthorne. My face slowly melted into an emotion of anguish and pain. Fisher pushed the face into the chalkboard with one hand and then swung the hammer at the back of her skull with the other. She fell to the floor instantly. You could hear the sound of the skull exploding. Some kids started vomiting. It was either Lucas or Nicholas. I know that it may seem like I'm showing no emotion to this situation, but at the time, I was terrified of Fisher. I'm still remotely suffering from the guilt of letting Nancy down. I couldn't live with myself for the longest time after that. I looked at the clock and noticed there were 24 minutes left in the class. He had spent a good 20 minutes since the start of his episode antagonizing Justin and Nancy, getting us to shut up with a whack of the hammer every now and then. After he smashed Nancy's head in, he just stared at the aftermath. He looked at Justin and then Nancy. And then he just started hyperventilating. He dropped the hammer and collapsed onto his office chair. This is when tears started to come to my eyes. Really, they did. This is when everyone realized his pain, his anger. I shouldn't have done this, but I did. I got out of my desk, walked up to Fisher, and then knelt down. He looked up at me from the palm of his hands. Then he started laughing. Tears on a red, smiling face. He raised his voice and greeted, "McGrady, how you doing?" "Mr. Fisher, we can help you." He chuckled at my response. "You help me?" "Ah, McGrady, your brilliant mind has been helping me all goddamn school year, but these delinquents in front of me can't do hell for me." "Mr. Fisher, listen." "Shut the hell up, McGrady." He shoved me into his office chair and then picked up his hammer. "Well, class, 18 minutes left, and look what we've accomplished." He wiped his hand on the chalkboard until his hand was red and pink with a coagulation of blood and brain matter. He then walked up to some kid in the back. I think his name was Eric, and he grabbed him by the hair, pulled his head back, and then smeared the substance on his face. Fisher wasn't angry. This was the most calm I've seen him ever. "As a class average, you're all failures, except for McGrady here. Learn from him, because he won't be dying today, although some more of you will." He laughed, stopped walking, and then looked to his right. "How you doing, Beaker?" Abruptly, swiftly, and carelessly, he swung the hammer at the back of his skull. Whack! The students were going insane, literally. Fisher's own insanity was radiating through the room and into the minds of his students. Kids were crying, shaking, and frozen in absolute shock. But what concerned me is that not a single one of them tried to leave. I didn't look at his spree of hammer swings, but I could hear it. I sat there until 5 minutes remained in class. Throughout a period of 30 minutes, there were 6 whacks. I didn't look at who. I didn't want to know who. All I know is that Justin and Nancy didn't make it. 2 people died, and I killed one of them. And yes, I absolutely blame myself for Nancy's fate to this very day. The bell rang, but all the students remained in their seats, staring at Fisher. And then suddenly, with a perverse smile, he says, "Class dismissed." Some students ran and screamed. Some students just walked out slowly without complaint. I was one of those people, and I was the last student out. Straying away from my class, Fisher shouts out to me, "McGrady!" 1,000 needles shot up my spine, and then I turned around to listen to Fisher's announcement. "Looks like you've passed." He started laughing like a madman. I could hear his laugh follow me as I walked down the hall. I could hear his laugh as I took my shortcut through the gymnasium. And I could hear his laugh over the incoming police sirens. I work as a correctional officer in a maximum security prison. Now, saying that probably brings up all sorts of images and ideas, but just know that the job is very different than what you see on TV. There are no nightly escape attempts, no big throwdowns on the yard every afternoon, and if your roommates are drunk, it's because they've been smuggling things out of the kitchen for weeks. Night shift, which was C shift, is not generally very exciting, but it does have its quirks. For example, all the guards on C shift knew about the mysterious shower in Quad 2 of confinement. At first, it was just a curiosity to help pass the time, a mystery to be solved, or some bit of annoyance that inmates could complain about ceaselessly. No one could have known how bad it would get in the end. I've been an officer in the confinement unit of this prison pretty much since I got certified. There's a real need for male officers in an all-male facility. Shocking, I know, and the confinement unit is no different. Typically, the crew is small, each one filling a desired need, and in the 2 years I've been here, I've seen and heard some things that you don't see on TV. I've heard hits planned out through the back grating in the windows. I've had all manner of things thrown at me through the flaps which we push their food and clothes in through. I've been called some pretty colourful names, and I've stumbled across my fair share of bodies, hanging and bleeding, which needed immediate medical attention. Shower 5, though, was definitely the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I couldn't begin to tell you why. I doubt anyone could. But sometimes, when you put an inmate in shower 5, they would reappear in shower 3. For those unfamiliar with how a prison quad is set up, let me explain. Each quad holds 28 cells, 14 on the bottom floor and 14 on the top floor, accessible by a catwalk. There are 5 showers in each quad. Showers 1 and 5 are on either side of cell 1 and 14. Showers 2 and 4 on either side of 15 and 28, and shower 3 sits between 21 and 22. We shower 2 quads a night, which roughly takes about 3 to 4 hours, and makes up the biggest part of our night. Quad 2's shower night was Monday, Wednesday and Friday. Inmates are cuffed, removed from cells, weighed, given haircuts, and are placed in the showers so we can search their cells. They're given roughly 15 minutes to wash and dry off before we come to cuff them and return them to their cells. While they're showering, they're locked in a shower cell about the size of, well, a household shower, while we go to the next quad over to do pretty much the same thing. Sometime within that 15-minute window, the inmate will close their eyes, to blink or maybe rinse their hair, and suddenly appear in shower 3. It would happen anywhere from 2 to 4 times a month at first. It was never anything you could count on, and we'd sometimes take bets on when it would happen. It never happened in reverse either. Shower 3 was broken, so we never used it. But when we did put an inmate in shower 3 for holding, he never went anywhere until we were ready for him to go somewhere. The shower was a mystery that provided a much needed break from a tedious job, and for the first 4 months we laughed at the looks on the faces of the confused inmates who appeared in shower 3 with a head full of shampoo or frantically searching for a towel that wasn't there. It was all fun and games until inmate Ferris disappeared. Inmate Ferris was one of the few who didn't request shower 5 every shower night. The others fought like cats to get this stall each shower night, and I'd come into quad many nights to the sound of them bickering about who would get it tonight or trying to trade their breakfast trays for someone's spot in the line. One inmate in particular, Garvey, used to trade his breakfast tray for the spot in line that would get him to shower 5 every shower night. He showered there 9 shower nights for every 10 and still never had it happen. One night in particular, we had just packed him away and put the next man into shower 5, only to return to find shower 3 occupied, shower 5 empty, and Garvey pouting like an angry child. They all tried, but in truth, and none of them got to experience it like Ferris did. When it came for Ferris to go, he said he wasn't going to shower 5. Normally this wouldn't have been a problem. There were usually tons of others willing to take his place. But tonight, Ferris was my last shower. Garvey immediately started hooting about wanting to take his place, but I ignored him. On that night, all I was thinking about was the food waiting for me in the fridge and the prospect of being done with another night of showers. There was also the matter of Ferris's smell. Ferris had been refusing his showers for the last 7 shower nights. The other shift didn't quite enforce the rules as we did about bathing once a week, and the administration had begun to take notice of his odour. They had sent down orders after the latest inspection that Ferris would shower tonight, on his own or with assistance. "Look, Ferris, you're going in that shower. It's the only one I have available, and you're my last shower." "I ain't going in that shower," he said evenly as he stared at me through the glass on the door. I waved Purvis off as he started walking towards us, not wanting to spook Ferris and create a situation where there didn't need to be one. "Look, Ferris, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. If you refuse the shower, I can get a bunch of angry men down here to pull you out and put you in the shower. Or you could be an adult and go take your shower so we can be done here. What's it going to be?" He argued for a bit, but in the end, he put on the cuffs and went to shower 5 meekly. I will always regret making him go. He was praying when I closed the shower door. It was very religious, and a shower that made people vanish was something he neither trusted nor understood. I closed him in and took off his cuffs, and at first, I didn't think he would take the shower at all. But as I descended the stairs, I heard the water start, and decided to make a trip to the officer's station to have a quick bite. 15 minutes later, I returned to find 3 occupied showers and 2 empty showers. Well, not exactly empty, I suppose. Ferris's towel still hung off the door, and his soap dish was sitting on the ledge, but there was no sign of inmate Ferris. Purvis looked around, not quite understanding what had happened, and wondered out loud if we'd filled all the showers before we left. I said we had, and Purvis and I spent the next hour searching every shower, every cell in the quad, and every cell and shower in the other 3 quads too. We checked the CCTV in the station, but there was no video of him leaving the shower. The video showed him showering 1 minute, and then gone the next. The strange shower hadn't disappeared Ferris to a different shower this time. It had simply made him disappear. The next 3 nights were a nightmare. Ferris's disappearance prompted an emergency search of all dorms, a compound-wide lockdown, the dispatching of the K9 team, and a countrywide manhunt that extended into neighbouring countries before it was finally called off after a fruitless 2 weeks. For 3 days we were questioned, had to make multiple written and verbal statements, and were grilled endlessly by both local and federal officers. The cameras clearly showed that we had been absent from the quad when Ferris disappeared. So, after 3 days, they had no choice but to let us return to work. We weren't sure what to make of the incident, but we chalked it all up to the strangeness with Shower 5 and went about work as usual. We didn't use Shower 5 anymore though. It seemed like the strange magic had finally turned sour, and after finally making maintenance come down and fix Shower 3, we stopped using it entirely. We didn't see Ferris for another 3 months. I've said we a lot in this story, but I haven't talked about the men I served with in confinement. Purvis was our muscle, 6 feet tall and built like a barrel, and I'm pretty sure all the inmates thought he communicated through grunts and the occasional "go to hell." If you weren't an inmate though, he was one of the nicest guys you'd ever care to know. I've spent many afternoons on his back porch with a beer in my hand and the smell of steak on the grill as I chatted with the third member of our trio. Sergeant McMahon, was a 10-year vet who spent most of his time doing paperwork or fielding questions from the brass. He let us handle most of the day-to-day drudgery while he insulated us in a warm blanket of correctly managed reports and accurately maintained logs. McMahon was far from what you'd call imposing, standing about 5'2" with thick glasses and a slim frame, but he was knowledgeable about his job and always had something to talk about. He was the last sergeant I ever served with in that confinement unit. 3 months passed and Ferris's disappearance was starting to fade. After the inquiries and inquests determined we'd had nothing to do with the disappearance, they put us back in confinement and told us to keep a closer watch in the future. We talked about it sometimes, speculating what could have happened to him, but ultimately we lost interest after the paperwork ended and the hype died down. He was gone, and we still had a job to do, so the showers went on and days turned into weeks. It was a Sunday when he came back. Sundays were normally a pretty easy day in confinement. We didn't do showers on Sunday night, and the night was spent cleaning and passing out toiletries and generally just finding something online to watch as we ran out the clock. We brought food in to share most Sundays, and this was no exception. I brought chicken, Purvis brought soda, and McMahon brought a pecan pie that his sister had made. By 9 o'clock, we had caught up our paperwork, passed out all our toiletries, and were full as ticks and ready to find a movie. I had my feet kicked up on my desk and was getting ready to enjoy a nap, when the sound of boots on doors started in Quad 2. Purvis looked up from the screen and sighed. I knew it was too good to be true. We headed out into the quad to see what all the kicking was about. As Purvis and I came through the door, we were buffeted by screams of "Shower 3" and "It's Ferris" and "He's dying." We came up the stairs 2 at a time, and what I saw will haunt me until the day I die. I'd seen men get hurt in this line of work. I'd seen men get stabbed, and I'd watched a few men die. But I had never seen anything to top this level of cruelty. It was Ferris, all right. We'd arrived in time to see his last few breaths and listen to him wheeze as his lungs finished filling with blood. He lay on the floor of the dirty shower, his blood pooling as it tried to flow into the drain, and shuddered out the last minutes of his life. He was naked, and we were saved having to look at his mutilated genitalia because of the fetal position he'd taken. A nurse would later tell us that they had been cut and sliced cruelly before he died, and his stomach and intestines were a mess of punctured tissue. We didn't know about this until later, but what we could see was horrific enough. His skin had been sliced by long claws, and his back looked as though something had tried to peel him a strip at a time. His arms, his legs, his neck, his face, and especially his back were bloody tatters, and when he finally died, I considered it a true mercy. "Go get the Sarge," Purvis said, and I was relegated to the bubble while McMahon went to the floor to access the situation. They took Ferris out under a sheet, and it was dripping red in its wake. This started a whole new bombardment of paperwork, CCTV footage being combed over a frame at a time, and witness statements being filled out and dispositions being taken. Luckily, we had done our rounds on time. One of us was on camera not even 30 minutes before he disappeared in the shower, and it was agreed upon that the incident had been no negligence of ours. The narrative they constructed was as unsatisfying as it was unbelievable, but it kept our bacon out of the fire, so we didn't argue. Ferris had managed to worm his way into the grates through the shower and had made it into the ventilation system. The other inmates had likely been feeding him and telling him to stop moving. This was before audio was normal in the dorms, so we couldn't check. And after 3 months, he'd gotten bored and wandered into one of the big fans and gotten cut up. He drug himself back into the shower 3 this time, and called for help, and that's where we found him. No inmate admitted to having talked to Ferris since he disappeared, and no blood was ever found in the vents. But this was a much better narrative than a shower that kept sending inmates from one shower to another. Sometimes the administration just wanted paperwork to look good. Making sense was secondary. After that, no inmate would go near shower 5. It spread the compound seemingly overnight, and any inmate that came into quad 2 would refuse to go into shower 5. We were more than happy to oblige the request. One more weird occurrence and they pull us all out and separate us between the other dorms. We all liked being where we were, and were in no hurry to get sent somewhere else. For the next month, we kept a low profile and tried our best to keep disturbances to a minimum. If we needed a reminder of the incident, all we had to do was look at the red stains on the floor of shower 3. We managed to keep the weirdness to a minimum for about a month before it came completely off the rails. Purvis and I were conducting showers in quad 3 and 4 when they brought in our latest wild child. Everett was what we'd call a frequent flyer, and had we known he was coming in, we'd have put him in the cell they'd just released him from 3 days ago. He'd gotten into another fight, probably over gang politics, and now he was sitting in the Sally Port again and cussing up a storm. When they asked us where we wanted him, we didn't even think about shower 5. We told them to just put him in the shower on the other side and we'd deal with him later. I don't know if he said something to them or not, but they later told us that they'd loaded him into shower 5, leaving the cuffs on because he was being combative, and left. We finished showers late that night, and just about the time my butt ate at the chair, I remembered Everett. I haven't heard a peep out of him. Did they load him into a cell? McMahon looked at his board and shook his head. Pretty sure they put him in a shower. A quick look through the glass told us that he wasn't in one of the ground floor showers. How could he be? We had used all the bottom showers to shower the other quads. When we asked them why they had put him in shower 5, they answered that it had been funny to watch him pee his pants in fear of the mystery shower. It was far less funny after the events of that night. We were preparing to go put him away when a chorus of screams brought our attention to the quad. The inmates were screaming, terrified wails that only the doomed are capable of, and the whole quad was going nuts. We could all see the door to shower 5 heaving and bucking as something slammed into it with a machine gun-like rhythm. That wasn't like any kicking I'd ever heard, and added to the screaming, it put me on edge. Shower 5 had become something sinister, something not altogether understandable, and I did not want to see what new horror it had in store for us. I started to move, despite my apprehension, but McMahon stopped me. I've got this. Call the captain and get some help down here while we go see what's going on. His actions saved me. He and Purvis left the station in a hurry, piling up at the door as they hunted for keys, and came through the door one behind the other as they mounted the steps. They were at the top of the stairs and heading towards the shower when the door to Shower 5 buckled outward. The door was reinforced metal, and whatever was on the other side had separated it from one of its hinges. The hinge hung lamely, concrete still clinging to it, as something dark and groping tried to climb through the hole. The snapping mouth glistened in the overhead lights as the creature scrambled and pushed to be free of its prison. I saw Purvis take a step back, bumping into McMahon as the two tried to process what was happening, and all thoughts of calling for help had fled from me as I watched the events unfold. The creature freed itself from the hole, black goo glistening on the torn door, and made its way up the wall with a hellish shriek and a metallic clittering I could hear through the glass. The whole quad had started screaming, and their hellish chorus was only drowned out by the creature's screams of pain as it left a glistening trail behind it on the concrete wall. The two officers, my friends, stood like statues as the thing swung its eyeless head from side to side. It seemed to be confused by all the screaming, the sound bouncing off the concrete, and I thought my fellow officers might escape as Purvis took another tentative step backward. That's when McMahon started screaming. I'd seen McMahon face down even the most hardened of inmates, seen him hold the line during last summer's riots as we held the gate against dozens of screaming inmates. But this creature was too much for him. He screamed, and it cut across the hellish sound of the quad like a knife through butter. The creature then turned its eyeless face towards him, and the front of its bulbous mouth split open to reveal lines of serrated teeth and a high-pitched sound like a piece of farm equipment scream. It leapt, coming stickily off the wall, but its path took it straight into Purvis, who was frozen in front of the screaming sergeant. It rode him to the ground, knocking McMahon off his feet, and the strange mouth ripped itself open to reveal the rows of black glistening teeth. Its mouth dove, and it tore chunks of flesh out of the screaming man as McMahon scooted backwards in a state of sheer terror. He reached for his gas, the small can of chemical spray that is normally our best defense against aggressive inmates, but his hand seemed unsure of how to break the seal that held it in the holster, or even whether or not he wanted to. The creature, meanwhile, of a quickly exsanguinating Purvis. Purvis was not a small man. I had seen him lay hands on men who would have given me trouble and put them on their faces as easily as someone subdues a child. Purvis was straining against the thing as it tore strips out of his shirt, his undershirt, and his chest, but his biceps were losing purchase, and he was starting to weaken. The creature raised its muzzle all at once and bit down on his face, engulfing the man's head in a single bite. And as Purvis kicked and thrashed under it, I saw McMahon get to his feet and make a run for it. The catwalk had 2 points of egress, and McMahon seemed to think that if he could get to the other side, he could elude the creature and put the solid steel door between them. He almost did too, until the creature looked up from the stripped skull it was now chewing on and heard him running down the stairs. It leapt frog-like and hit one of the overhead lights, and the cage light swung drunkenly before falling to the concrete with a shower of glass and twisted bars. As it fell, the creature leapt off of it and caught McMahon in the back as he ran for the door. The door is framed by 2 large glass windows that stand about 25 feet high, so you can glance out of the quad and see what's happening at any given time. The creature slammed into McMahon and plastered him against one of these windows like a bug. His nose broke, his glasses shattered, and as he slid down, I could follow his progress with the trail of blood he left. The only thing visible was one hand spasmodically grasping at the impenetrable barrier between him and freedom as the creature devoured him. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there with the phone in one hand, dial tone blaring at me, and the radio in the other hand, putting out the same good-natured chatter it usually does at this time at night. It was so weird to think that somewhere else in the compound there were people having normal nights. While my 2 best friends were being devoured before my eyes, there were actually people out there having comfortable nights filled with nothing more pressing than a bellyache or an unruly inmate who wouldn't go to bed. It didn't even seem possible that our universes could be on the same plane of existence. I think that's when my mind snapped. Or maybe it was when I looked up from the radio and saw the creature looking at me, its eyeless face staring straight at me, that my mind simply unravelled. I let the phone slip out of my hand, let the radio clatter to the desk, and simply curled in a ball on the floor. I don't know how long I was there, but when I came back to, the captain was shaking me, and all hell had truly broken loose. They had come in after I didn't answer the radio. They had used the emergency keys to come into the station and found me on the ground in a catatonic state. They had then looked out and seen the blood splattering on the window and feared that a riot was underway. They had assembled their response team, a 7-man team with riot gear, and proceeded into the quad. As I looked out into the shadowy hellscape, I could see that several of the cells had been opened somehow, and there was a lot more blood on the floor than I remembered. The remains of body armor and broken shotguns lay everywhere, and the lights in the quad seemed to be in a constant state of flicker. The team had gone in and been attacked by what they thought was a mountain lion or some kind of big cat. They had been ripped to shreds in a matter of minutes, and only the team leader had managed to escape after throwing a flash grenade in the thing's face. It had battered the door a little while trying to get at him, but had eventually gone back to eating the remains of the other 6 members. The team leader said it looked like some of the other inmates had been killed, though he couldn't figure out how this thing was getting into the cells. They looked to me for answers, but I had none. The team leader joined me in the fetal ball in the corner while the captain made calls for backup. I sat in that station for the next 2 days, nodding off when sleep finally took me, and watched as the state police and animal control tried to figure out how to get this thing out of the quad. After the 3rd police officer was ripped to shreds, we got a visit from someone higher up. He told us that the quad was to be quarantined until further notice, the reflective lenses on his sunglasses making him look as inhuman as the creature, and that no one was to go in or out until this thing was dead. The captain asked him what we should do about the men trapped inside, men who hadn't eaten in 2 days, and he simply shrugged and said if they were in there, then they were as good as dead already. That thing isn't going to let anyone out once they're in, and a rescue attempt isn't going to do anything but lose you more men. Don't worry though, we'll make it so no one who's gone through that door ever existed. He was true to his word too. McMahon and Purvis were unmarried bachelors, and so they could just disappear one day after work. Of the 27 inmates that had been in that quad, I don't know. Their files were gone when I came back. Their DC numbers and CDC records were expunged, and all the cells were open and empty. The doors to Quad 2 were sealed shut, the door welded closed and caution tape draped across it. I was offered McMahon's position as confinement sergeant. I took it not because I wanted it, but because I felt it was my sacred trust to stand guard against that thing every night. I've never seen it during the day. It doesn't seem to like the light. But at night, you can catch glimpses of it in the darkness as it stalks the rats and roaches that still live in the quad. The new officers they put back there always ask me what happened to Quad 2, but I never tell them the whole story. If they knew, they might try to get its attention and add more blood to my hands. I've seen officers come and go in the 10 years since that day, but I haven't told anyone about the incident. My captain is a major now at another facility. Everyone from my old shift has either quit or moved on, and I alone keep my vigil here every night. Sometimes I see him in the semi-darkness, looking at me and thinking. After 10 years, I imagine he's hungry for something more than rats. Maybe in another 10 years, he'll question how thick that glass is between him and real meat. When he does, I'll be here. I fully admit to being a stoner, but I promise you, I'm not making this up. No amount of roaches can cook up a fever dream like this, so don't start pulling excuses to wave off my story, alright? Let me explain to you how this went down. So, picture this. I'm on the low end of the high I got off of popping an edible and playing some Mortal Kombat when I get a series of texts from this chick I'm totally head over heels for, asking me for a favour. Eve was everything I wanted in a woman. She was about as goth as they come, always wearing dark lipstick that matched her hair, some kind of fishnets on her legs, and this big, oversized beanie that holstered some spare dollar bills to spend on Pop-Tarts. She had a sharp tongue, a sharp mind, and even sharper nails. We became familiar with each other towards the tail end of high school, where I started selling her weed at a discounted price that made her smile. We had a habit of smoking together, but our relationship never went past friends who hotboxed their dad's garage. Sometime after we both graduated, she got a gig as a late-night gas station employee, whilst I stayed drifting at home, collecting scraps of cash to fund my mom's dream of me going to college. But here she was, texting me at 9:12 p.m, begging me to fill in a shift for a couple of hours. Had this been anyone other than her, I would have either told them I was busy or ignored the text outright. But for her, well, I'd do anything. Mom wasn't home, so I had to call myself an Uber to get to a gas station in time. I sneakily picked some of my neighbour's flowers out of the garden, holding them in a glass cup I brought from home. The last thing I grabbed from home was a tiny baggie of dope, along with some rolling papers just in case. This is it, I thought to myself on the ride there. This is where I woo her off those big platform boots she wears. Maybe 15 minutes later, my Uber driver dropped me off. I paid him a generous tip and walked to a little gas station, a cup of flowers in hand. Hotboxing may not have been the best pickup tactic, but what kind of girl doesn't like flowers? I'm a tall blonde-haired stoner. How could she say no? Was I overconfident? Maybe, but confidence is key, fellas. I'd only been to the gas station in the middle of nowhere a few times, but tonight it felt like coming home. The doors opened on their own as I walked in, seeing her pale face smirk at me from behind the counter. "Took your time showing up," she said. Running a hand through my hair, I gave her the suavest response I could. "Well, you know me. So, how come you got to split from your shift?" I placed the cup of flowers firmly on the counter, noticing the single swaggering pink petunia inside. She plucked it out of the cup and sniffed it pleasantly. "It's some stupid anniversary for a friend of mine I forgot. I would have been boned had you not been here, though." That sneaky eyelash batter she did. Her eyes widened like a puppy. Damn, she had me around her finger, and she knew it. "You bet," I said proudly. "I'll do whatever you need me to do, but I want something in return." Her manicured eyebrows arched curiously. "You need something? Here I thought you were here at my beck and call," she pouted. As much as I wanted to succumb to her infectious charm, I'd stay strong in playing hard to get. "Well, I don't mind lending a hand, as long as you, lend me yours, if you know what I mean." I made the motion of putting on a ring over my finger, earning a chuckle from her. "You're a riot, Cole." She put the petunia inside her beanie and patted my shoulder. A tall task for her, given our height difference. Even the boots she wore didn't help. "I'll be back around 1 a.m, alright?" she said. "Once I come back, you can go home. Just be ready for when I text you tomorrow for our date." My heartbeat started thundering in my chest as soon as she said it. "You can count on me," I shouted, giving her a thumbs up. She smirked back at me as she exited the store, very aware of the fact that I loved watching her from behind. Once she was out of sight, I raised my arm into the air, feeling a sense of beautiful triumph over winning a date from her. And all I had to do was watch some gas station for 3 hours. How hard could that be? I ate my words pretty damn fast when I found out the fact that I was the only person who was going to come into the gas station for my entire shift. I didn't expect a big turnout at this time, but no one at all. I've never felt this bored in my life. The apex of my excitement an hour into the shift was putting some spare change I had lining my pockets to open up and boil a package of instant ramen with the crappy electric kettle the store had in the closet. I got intimately close with all the contents of the closet, mostly just dusty plastic trays and old chip packages. I did find an old register though. I guess I got have some fun pressing the buttons and hearing the sound effects coming from them. The first hour is where I realized that in my rush, I had actually forgotten my phone, leaving me with only my wallet, the rolling paper, and dope bag in my pockets. As much as I wanted to smoke it, I was kind of paranoid, thinking about if someone caught me, so I kept them sealed tight. Maybe another half hour passed, and I started to find the terrible fold-up chairs I found out back becoming more and more comfortable as I sat down and began to close my eyes for 10-second bits. Those 10 seconds shortly became 30, which then became minutes at a time. Just before I was going to fall asleep for good, a sudden and loud thud jolted me awake. The whole building shook for just a moment. The fork I used to eat the ramen clanged to the ground, and the already damaged lights began to flicker. Peering outside through the glass doors, I wasn't able to see anything. What had caused that tremor? Did I nearly just sleep through an earthquake? I opened my ears and was able to hear the faintest sound of plastic hitting the ground like it had been thrown with force. Snaking through the aisles, I found everything was in place, so nothing here got knocked over. The sounds of plastic could be heard again, this time dragging against the ground. It took me a second, but I eventually got the idea that the recycling bin I saw out back was being knocked over and raided by raccoons. Always hated those furry buggers. Arming myself with a broom that was huddled by the counter, I made my way to the end of the gas station and kicked open the door, prepared to shoo away any raccoons I saw. What I didn't expect was to see the recycling bin completely torn apart, lying empty on its side. This wasn't the kind of damage trash pandas were capable of. The bin was completely torn in half from the middle, with thick, stroking claw marks, like a damn bear just came through and tore it apart. Damn, was there a bear? I sure as hell couldn't defend myself with a broom if there was. I went to open the back door, and my heart sank to realize that it had closed on its own and locked. I'm pretty sure Eve took the key needed to unlock that door with her by mistake, so I had to walk all the way around the store to get back inside via the front. As I walked, I could see slash marks remarkably similar to the ones that had torn apart the recycling bin across the building, scarring the concrete the building was made out of like it was flesh. These marks looked far bigger than any bear claw, so the bear idea was out of the window. What kind of animal was I dealing with here? Before I could come up with any more theories, I heard the most fearsome, grumbling roar I've ever heard in all of my life. It sounded like a mountain lion being drowned in icy water, letting out its final screech for help before its life was snuffed out. The worst part? It was coming from inside the store. I peeked around the corner and saw that the automatic doors were stuck open, struggling to shut themselves closed. A tangle of sopping wet black hair entangled both of them, acting like a rope holding both doors open. The lights inside were now flickering rapidly, chipping away at my already minuscule resolve. Swallowing deeply, I tiptoed closer inside and got an eyeful of what was making the noise. A black, scaly, alligator-like creature with a horse-like mane running down to its rat-like tail was scurrying across the floor, lapping up crumbs and dust with its forked tongue. The beast was easily 10 feet long and 4 feet tall, bumping into aisles and knocking things over. Each one of its slimy scales oozed with a dark liquid that began to pool on the floor like tar. I stood no chance with. God knows what this thing was. So I went to turn around and sprint away, but I dropped my broom in the process. The creature noticed and whipped his head around so damn fast I thought it would break its own neck. This thing had human features on its face. Dark, brown eyes, a small button-like nose, and the soft, pitch-black lips of a woman. All these human features plastered on its lizard body made for a disgusting sight that looked straight out of a Photoshop nightmare. I booked it away from the store as the creature turned around and started crawling after me, hissing its forked tongue. The lizard creature was surprisingly fast despite its appearance, practically gliding across the concrete with its glittering claws. At first, I made a straight dash in front of me near a road, but I made a hard left in order to gain the upper hand and use the momentary speed advantage to escape and use someone's phone to call animal control, or the police, or anyone to deal with this thing. Unfortunately, it seemed to predict this motion wholesale, because it turned around to its left at the precise moment I was going to hard curve it. It made a slash for my ankles, but I just barely hopped out of the way and kept running. The beast groaned and creaked as it chuckled at me, but kept its frightening pace. Feeling the stress of exhaustion weighing on me, I used my last bits of energy to run behind the store and into a small collection of thick trees, hopping onto the nearest one and climbing it as fast as I could. I was never much of an adept climber as a kid, but hysterical strength is a way stronger drug than any weed I've smoked. I quickly made my way onto the top layer of the branches, hearing the creature scratch at the base of the tree angrily. I was afraid it would try to tear the tree down, but it instead snarled and screeched at me once more, seemingly upset that its prey had evaded it. After maybe another minute of it roaring at me, it trotted off in the opposite direction, practically galloping like a horse. My immense relief was short-lived, as I spotted someone walking along the dimly lit road. They were wearing a huge pea-green military coat and had long blonde hair, just walking idly down the road. I didn't allow myself to question why they were walking, as the creature spotted them and started running down the road. I wanted to shout and alert the attention of the bystander, but fear's grip on me was too tight. I slid down the tree carefully and took a full minute to gather the strength to unhook myself from it, and ran inside the gas station, peeking from the windows. By now, the bystander had walked far enough to nearly reach the parking lot of the gas station, making direct eye contact with the creature. The beast chuckled once more and started charging for the bystander. But they had far more tricks up their oversized sleeves than I anticipated. Skillfully, they rolled out of the way and pulled out a massive knife from behind them, making a precise slash against the beast's cheek. It screeched in pain and received another slash that cut along their scalp and marked a single eye. It went into full panic rage mode as it blindly swung its claws at the mysterious man who was able to dodge all of them. He took what I thought to be some kind of fighting stance as he looked for an opening, all with a completely blank expression on his face. In a final move, the bystander leapt and plunged their blade directly into the malformed skull of the beast, twisting and digging the blade deeper and deeper until it stopped screaming and went silent. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. How the hell was this random night-walking guy able to dispatch this thing so fast? Hell, why did he even have such a massive knife on him in the first place? The man pulled out a rag from his jacket pocket and wiped away the dark blood that coated his blade, sticking it behind his back once more. Using both hands, he dragged the beast away from all of the streetlights and leaned over it like a dentist would to operate on their patients. He started rubbing the beast up and down with his bare hands, and I kid you not, it started disintegrating at his touch. He was as quick and efficient as a masseuse, causing the beast to crumble and fade away into a mountain of ash and dust within seconds. Looking none the bothered, he swept the ash off the road and made his way towards the gas station. I ducked under the window and huddled up in the corner, praying that he wasn't going to do the same to me. I felt like such a damn idiot for forgetting my phone. I was so damn ashamed I wasn't going to be able to call anyone, call Eve or even my mother. I could hear the man tearing away the bundles of hair that held the doors open and walk inside, his big boots sending my heart into shock with their thick reverb against the floor. I held my breath as he seemed to walk aimlessly through the aisles, picking up food and putting it down indecisively. Finally, he walked up to the counter and placed a bag onto it. "Anyone there?" he asked out casually. Praying everything would turn out all right, I made the calmest face I could manage and stood up rapidly, getting an eyeful of this mysterious monster hunter. Honestly, he looked pretty average. He was just a youth, probably near the same age as me, kind of a tall and pretty long hair and thick bags under his eyes. He looked at me blankly as he waited for me to check out his bag of cough drops he had put on the counter. As I nervously checked him out, he decided to make some small talk with me. "Quiet shift?" he asked. No, actually, it wasn't a quiet shift. I think it was the worst shift I've ever had in my life. I almost died for Christ's sake. But I don't think he saw me being chased by whatever the beast was, so I played it cool. "Yep, not much going on. How come you're up so late?" Before I could kick myself for asking such a stupid question, he responded, "Not much really. I'm just a night owl." The fact that he can go from killing and vaporizing a monster to casual small talk, all with the same expression on his face, chilled me to the bone, and he noticed. "You're right, buddy. You look like you've seen a ghost." "No, my ride left me last minute," I lied. "No clue how I'm going to get home now." "I don't mind driving you," he said. "My car's just down the road. Come on." My heart flew into a panic as I raised my hands to try and politely refuse his offer. Getting into a car with this guy? No chance. "I'm fine, really," I stammered. "Don't worry about me." The man gave me a curious look, but didn't press me on the matter. "How come you don't have a name tag?" he asked earnestly. I gulped. "I'm just filling in for a friend," I explained. "Name's Cole." The man gave me a slight smile and reached his hand out, which I quickly shook. His hands were so cold, like he had just stuck them in an icebox. "Nice to meet you, son," he said. He looked no older than I, but by the way he called me son, felt all too natural, like he was my elder in mind over body. "My name's Jamie." I fumbled, giving Jamie his change for his cough drops, nearly dropping the stack of quarters in my hand. "You have yourself a good night, you hear?" he said. "Probably ain't too safe at this hour." I nodded my head quickly as he left the store casually, parting with a wave of his icy hand. As soon as he was out of sight, I let out the longest sigh of my life and fell to my knees, crippled with fear. It was a long walk, but I hoofed it out and ran all the way home, doing my best to stay away from any streetlights. I was terrified of running into any other creatures or Jamie, but I had to get out of there. I felt like crap for abandoning Eve's shift like that, but once I got home and called her over the phone, she would hopefully understand my situation. My legs were exhausted when I finally reached my house, which I proceeded to lock down as much as I could. I got my hands on my phone again and sent out a dozen calls and several dozen messages to Eve to try and explain the situation. But as of now, I haven't gotten any responses. It's been an hour after the incident, but my heart is still very much stuck in panic mode. I think I'll just unwind with a baggie in my pocket and wait till Ma gets home. I don't know what the hell the creature was, or who Jamie really was, but I'm in no mood to find out. I'm never going to that gas station again. I knew I'd made a mistake in coming, but I took a seat nonetheless. All of the Alcoholics Anonymous meeting on my side of town seemed warm and welcoming. All of the people were friendly and knew me by name. There were hugs, handshakes, slaps on the back. The rooms were well lit with comfortable chairs. There were always freshly baked cookies or donuts. A recent falling out with my sponsor, Ralph, had caused me to choose to avoid some of my normal meetings though. I had already been down to 2 meetings a week, which Ralph had so poignantly called me to the carpet on, so I didn't want to cut those out completely. I had been feeling antsy lately and probably needed to go to a few more. Never the type to ask for help, I was unwilling to admit it though. Instead, I decided to try a few meetings on the other side of the tracks. Whitehall, the seedy part of town. Stupid Ralph. "You're only as sick as your secrets," he said. I had made a list of all those I had harmed and went about making amends to them all. Some accepted my apologies, some didn't. All I could do was clean on my own side of the street. There were a few amends that were impossible to make, but I had admitted all of my sins to either my sponsor, my therapist, or my priest. All but the one thing, that is. That's what Ralph kept harping on. I had stayed sober for 15 years. I deserved to keep the one thing to myself, didn't I? Stupid Ralph. I chose a group with the innocuous name of New Hope that met in the basement of St. Pete's Episcopal Church. While groups sometimes did actually meet in church basements, they were rarely as depicted on television or in the movies. That's just not the way things worked. Hollywood had gotten the coffee and donuts part down to a T, but missed the mark on most of the rest. Sadly, there weren't even any donuts at the New Hope group. I wish that I'd known. I would have sprung for some. AA had given me my life back and brought a good bit of financial security with it, so I don't mind giving back now and again. I made my way over to the coffee urn, making eye contact with a few people on the way. I didn't even bother to smile. The most I got was some grunts and shrugs as I walked by. I had already decided that I wouldn't ever be coming back to this group, so why bother? I wasn't about to walk out though. Giving up was for losers. I grabbed a styrofoam cup from the top of the stack, which already had some black smudge fingerprints on the outside, and filled it with a sludge that they called coffee here at St. Pete's. I threw a buck into the basket on the table and plopped into a chair that seemed to be farthest away from everyone else. This was nothing like the usual meetings I hit. The church's basement room was about 40 by 40 feet square. There were 8 rectangular folding tables set up in a makeshift circle with wooden chairs set along the outside. Unfortunately, there would be no speaker. This was a discussion meeting. They would most likely read something out of some bit of AA-approved literature, the Big Book, 12 and 12, or some meditation book, and then go around the room weighing in on their own personal experience, strength and hope. I didn't feel like talking, but the one bit of my sponsor's advice that I had latched onto early was to always say something, always be part of. Even though the ceiling held banks of fluorescent lights, the room still seemed cold. Perhaps it was the type of bulb they used. Were they different types? Or perhaps it was the way the light reflected off the sickly yellow linoleum floor and institution green walls. It smelled funny too. Oh well, I thought, it's only for an hour. I'd spent twice that amount of time scraping together change for another bottle while fighting off the shakes in the past. In comparison, this would surely be more pleasurable than that. That's what it came down to, wasn't it? For me, to drink is to die. There were times that I had done the most disgraceful things in order to get drunk. Things that would have sickened me if I had been sober and not fiending for the next drink. So, if sitting through a boring meeting in a crappy place meant not drinking, even for only an hour, then so be it. Not a difficult choice. I am not a snob. but I thought that people there seemed to be a little lower class than what I was used to. I'm by no means rich, but by now I've gotten my life together. I'm back in the upper middle class demographic. The meetings that I attended were regularly frequented by businessmen, doctors, realtors, and other professionals. Frankly, even the blue-collar people at my normal meetings seemed to be upper class compared to these people. These people were, and I have to remind myself that I was being honest and not uncaring, the dregs of society. Unshaven, unkempt, tattooed, greasy, foul-smelling. AA had taught me not to judge. There, but for the grace of God, go I. Still, it was hard. Just before the meeting was called to order, a man plopped down into the chair next to me. Oh, come on, buddy, I thought. 10 empty chairs, plenty to keep enough distance between all of us, and you have to sit right next to me. I sighed. At least this guy seemed friendly. Short, stout, PC for obese, with a red, round face. He introduced himself. Hi there, name's Mike. How about you? Danny, I said, as I extended my hand. At least Mike was dressed well. Button-down shirt, slacks, dress shoes. He was even wearing cologne. Or was it the smell of booze? No, I decided it was cologne. The guy's breath smelled bad though. Not smelled as in drinking smelled, but just reeked. His teeth seemed white enough, but it was as if he hadn't brushed in ages. Mike tried to make small talk. I haven't seen you before. How long have you been coming to these meetings? About 16 years, I replied. I came in for a year and then decided that I wasn't ready to stop. I went back out for a while and have been sober ever since. 15 years, 1 month, 1 week, and 2 days. Wow. Mike seemed truly amazed. How many minutes? I just smiled. Me? Mike continued. I've only been coming for about a month now. I'll have 30 days on Wednesday. Well, congratulations. For some people, those first 30 days are the hardest. Real white knuckle time. Mike was definitely pink clouding it. That's the term for AAs in early sobriety who think that life has suddenly become wonderful and carefree. After a good period of sobriety, it kicks in that drunk or not, life still has challenges. There's just no more alcohol to make the bad feelings go away. I'll be getting my chip. Mike was of course referring to the coloured aluminium medallion that, although not universally used, has become almost synonymous with AA. Sobriety coins themselves do not help people stay sober as much. It's the meaning behind them that is important. When a person receives a coin for 1 month, 3 months, or a long period of time, the coin gives a sense of pride for staying sober as long as they have, and to motivate them to continue. If a person should feel the desire to drink again, they might finger the coin in their pocket to remind them of all the headway they have made up to that point. It makes them ask themselves if they truly want to throw away all that progress. I never liked the chips. I would occasionally step back and remember exactly how much sober time I had, remember that last drunk vividly, but I didn't want a constant reminder. I felt it would make it easier to ask the question, has it been long enough? Am I cured now? The conversation was surprisingly pleasant enough, but I was happy when the meeting began all the same. Same old, same old. Business first, then reading, then around the table sharing. When 8 o'clock rolled around, the chairperson indicated that it was time to close, and they joined hands for the Lord's Prayer. AA is not a religious organisation, but saying the Lord's Prayer at the end is sort of a tradition in most, but not all, groups. It's a sign of unity, if nothing else. I really didn't plan to stick around for fellowship afterwards, but I always stayed long enough to help clean up. However, before I got to the door, Mike cornered me. Hey, am I going to see you around here again? Eh? I pulled a face. Probably not. I live on the other side of town. I just stopped here tonight because, well, it was convenient. I guess that had not technically been a lie. AAs had to be careful. Practice these principles in all of our affairs. Lies paved a slippery slope. Oh, Mike seemed dejected. It's just that they say to get phone numbers, you know, to call for when you feel like drinking, and I was wondering if I could get yours. My shoulders relaxed a little. Of course, Mike, that's never a problem. Never feel like you can't use it. Mike wouldn't use it. Most of the newbies never did. I pulled out a pen and jotted it down in the back of Mike's meeting pamphlet anyway. There you go. Thanks, Danny. Mike shook the pamphlet. I will definitely use this. You're a lifesaver. You guys are great. Mike bounced away. I made my way out into the parking lot and slid behind the wheel of my 2012 Kia. I said a little prayer for Mike. Hope he makes it. Who knew? Maybe being at that meeting was God's way of putting him in the right place at the right time. I rolled through the Burger King drive-thru on the way home to pick up an artery-clogging dinner. I just wanted to flick on the television, eat, shower, and get to bed. It had been an exhausting day. I barely pulled into my garage when my cell phone began to jingle. I finished parking, unbuckled my seatbelt, and answered the phone right there in the front seat. It was an old habit, probably not a healthy one, but I just had to pick up the phone when it rang. I could not bear the thought of someone leaving a message. I had heard stories of AAs who were never able to get through to someone, and things didn't turn out well. Once their faith in the system was broken, especially the newcomers, they didn't trust it anymore. Hello? Dano, it's Mike. I shifted the phone to my right ear. What's up, Mike? Oh, no. Don't worry, Dan. I'm not thinking of drinking. Just wanted to test out the number. Practice call, you know. They say to get used to calling when you don't need to, and that way it'll be easy to call when you need to, right? Yeah, Mike. That's a great idea. So, what's up? Well, not a whole lot since I saw you. I drove home. That's about it, I said with a smirk on my face. I'm about to have some dinner, and then it's off to bed. Oh, okay, Mike replied. You have your dinner and get a great night. Maybe I'll talk to you tomorrow. Sure, Mike, tomorrow. I showered, toweled off, and padded into my bedroom. I slid into a pair of silk boxers and fell into bed. I didn't imagine that I would have any problem sleeping. I was physically exhausted, but as usual, my mind raced a mile a minute. I was never able to fall asleep without the radio turned on, even when I was ready to pass out. My head would hit the pillow and the stinking thinking would kick in. That's how I discovered the wonders of talk radio. Dialed into a pundit recapping the day's news in a soothing voice, I pulled the chain of my bedside lamp and plunged the room into darkness. The pillow was cool. My stomach was full. My mind had calmed. Sleep began to... My phone jingled. I propped myself up on one elbow, used the remote to turn off the radio, and grabbed the phone from the nightstand. Its screen lit up with the number of the incoming call, but I didn't recognize it. It wasn't a name that had been programmed into my phone. I briefly considered putting the phone back down and letting it go to voicemail, but I knew that I would not be able to sleep until I heard the message and, more than likely, called whomever it was back. I sighed. Hello? Danny? Mike sounded grave this time. Sorry to call so late. I mean, I know you said that you were going to hit the hay, and I didn't want to bother you, but... It's okay, Mike. Go ahead. Remember how I said that I'd be getting my chip in a couple of days? Yeah. I can't believe it'll have been a month already. You know, the day I took my last drink was a special day. Every day is a special day when it's your last drunk day, Mike. Yeah, but I mean special. It was the anniversary of... well... Mike began to get flustered. See, my wife and I, my ex-wife that is, and I, lost our daughter that day. I swung my legs out from under the covers and sat up. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, don't be, Danny. It happened so long ago. Long time ago. It would have been her 21st birthday. Mike trailed off. So long ago. The denial, the depression, the sadness, the anger. I started drinking afterward and just never thought to stop. Until now, that is. That's a long time to be stewing in it, Mike. Do you want to talk about it? Nah, Danny. No sense dredging up the past. Not when I'm doing so well. You're only as sick as your secrets, Mike. God, I hated it when my sponsor was right. Yeah. Maybe when I'm feeling a little more stable, Danny. Maybe I'll talk about it then. I'm just not doing so well right now. I spoke with Mike for about half an hour, and when I was convinced that Mike was over the edge to drink, let him off the phone and promised to meet him the following day. I laid down my phone and swung back under the covers, a smile on my face. What was it they say? Even if Mike went out and drank that night, at least I stayed sober. Help yourself by helping others. I forgot to turn the radio back on, and that night, I dreamt about the one thing. I awoke to the sound of my phone. It wasn't the alarm tone, but the ringtone. Another call. I had come to recognize Mike's number by now. This was getting a little annoying, but sometimes that's the way it went. Mike would either fall off the wagon soon, or he would start to make new contacts. In the meantime, I would just have to deal with it. Good morning, Mike. Dan, my man. Good to hear your voice. Yeah, I said, scratching the back of my head. It's been like 6 or 7 hours now, huh? Oh yeah, I'm not bothering you, am I? No. Yes, I thought. So, how did last night go? Didn't drink, did you? Nope, and I owe it all to you, Dan. Well, Mike, you picked up the phone and made the call, so you can give yourself a little pat on the back. That phone can seem real heavy when it stands between you and a drink. Ain't that the truth? So, are you hitting the meeting this morning? No, Mike. I have a job. I tried not to sound ticked off. I have to work today. I promise that we'll get to one tonight. You pick it out, and call me back around 6, okay? Got it, Dano. 6. Talk to you then. My worst fear came true. 3 more calls during the day. Mike had picked a group called As Bill Sees It on my side of town. I decided that I would need to have a talk with Mike that evening. Calling when in need, or even for occasional friendly support was fine. But there was such a thing as abusing the system. You know, the boy who cried wolf sort of thing. I was about ready to throw my always answer the phone policy out the door. I didn't look forward to the conversation, and had a rough time forcing my dinner down that evening. I wasn't hungry, but, as usual, I tried to keep my stomach full. HALT. H-A-L-T. Hungry, angry, alone, tired. 4 things an alcoholic never wanted to be. Any of those could be a setup for another drink. As I was finishing my second hot dog, wrapped in white bread with ketchup, just as I liked them, my phone rang again. I checked the screen. Bloody Mike. Again, I decided that I wouldn't answer it and let it go to voicemail. Seconds later, it rang again. Didn't that guy get the message? I let it go to voicemail again. Another few minutes passed and it rang again. I wondered if Mike had changed his mind. Maybe he couldn't make it to the meeting after all. Still, I let it go to voicemail. Thankfully, more minutes passed and Mike did not call back. I felt like a heel, but I just couldn't deal with it anymore. At around 7:15, I tied my shoes and gathered my wallet and car keys. As I headed to the door, my phone jingled. Mike. This time I answered. Hey Mike, I'm heading out the door right now. Oh, thank God, Dan, exclaimed Mike. I couldn't get a hold of you, and then I started to worry. I wondered if maybe you went out drinking again. Mike, slow down, buddy. I was beginning to let my temper get the best of me. Would you... Oh, look, just wait for me at the meeting. Outside, we need to talk. Mike was breathing more regularly now. Oh, Danny, you really had me going there. Well, anyway, you can ride with me. What? I strode out of the back door and pressed the button to lift the garage. As the door rolled up, it gradually revealed a battered, green Honda sitting in the drive. Mike sat behind the wheel with the engine idling. I was taken aback. I walked briskly up to the driver's side door and motioned for Mike to lower the window. After a moment, with a confused look on his face, Mike hit the button and the window glided down. What's wrong, Dan? Hop in. I thought that maybe we could ride to the meeting together, then maybe grab a cup of coffee after, huh? I was fed up. No, Mike. No meeting, no coffee after. I don't have time for this. I don't know what to do with you. You cannot keep calling me. How the hell did you even find where I live? Oh, Mike looked shamefacedly. I guess maybe I, followed you home last night? What the hell? Sorry, Dan, I'm new at this. I really don't know how it works. How it works? Having a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. I thought it over and softened. Okay, Mike, here's how it goes, I said calmly. I'll come to the meeting, but I drive there myself. We talk a little. After the meeting, I come home alone. No coffee, no more calling unless you really need to, like I'm going to drink need to. Are we clear? Mike looked a little hurt, but replied, Okay, clear, Dano. I got into my Kia and followed Mike to the meeting. We sat next to each other, but Mike was uncharacteristically quiet. Afterward, we separated in the parking lot with a nary word. See you tomorrow, Danny. Maybe. Oh, hey, said Mike. There's a candlelight meeting called Night Owls tonight at the... Alright, sorry. Tomorrow, Mike, I stressed. I thought that Mike may have gotten the message, but just in case, I turned my phone off for the evening for what was probably the first time in years. That night, I had a nightmare about the one thing. I pulled myself from bed and showered in the morning, and had almost forgotten my phone. Still wrapped in a towel with damp hair, I walked over to the nightstand and turned it on. I returned to the bathroom as it went through the boot-up process, and then I heard a message tone from the next room. Wonder who that could be. 6 missed calls from Mike. 1, 2 voicemails, 4 texts. Thanks for coming, Dan, said one. Sure you don't want to go to the meeting, said another. Great meeting, should have been there. And, need to talk. I didn't want any confrontation today. I turned my phone back off, dressed and left home. I knew, just knew, that Mike would show up at my door after not receiving answers for long enough. I planned to not be there. Even though it was a Saturday, I would hang out at my office. There was a couch there. I could take a nap if need be, and I did need it after the previous night. I felt silly and demoralized. It was my own house, damn it. I was being chased away from my own home by, well, a stalker. Should I call the police? No, I decided. I would talk to my sponsor first. Not daring to turn my cell back on for fear that it might ring in my hand. Upon arriving at my office, I picked up my desk phone and dialed in Ralph's number. Ralph was no help. At least, he didn't tell me what I wanted to hear. Just suck it up. I've had my share of pigeons who either tried too hard or didn't try hard enough. My guess is that this Mike guy will turn out to be one or the other. Why don't you bring him along to tonight's meeting? I'll meet you guys at the acceptance group tonight. Maybe I can have a talk with him. Yeah, I suppose. I turned my cell back on in order to call Mike and invite him to the acceptance group that evening. 6 missed calls, and it was barely noon. I sighed and began to scroll to Mike's number when my phone jingled. I didn't even need to look at the number to know who it was. Hi, Mike. Danny, I tried to... Yeah, I know, Mike. I've been at work. I just turned my phone on and saw that you were called. An icy thought ran down my spine. Did Mike know where I worked too? Anyway, my sponsor suggested that I introduce you to him tonight. We're going to St. Andrews to a meeting called the Acceptance Group. Want to come? Are you kidding? Do you even need to ask? I would never pass on the chance to meet my sponsor's sponsor. He's like, what, my grand sponsor? Whoa. I thought about it and never had the talk of me being Mike's sponsor come up. A sponsor is a recovering alcoholic who has successfully made some personal progress in the AA recovery program. He or she is asked by another AA member to take on the individual responsibility of sponsorship. A sponsor shares their experiences on an individual and personal basis with another alcoholic who is trying to achieve or maintain their own sobriety through the AA program. They help the person focus and navigate through the stages of the program. The relationship between an AA member and his sponsor is usually a pretty close and intimate one, and not gone into lightly. Not only does an alcoholic need to carefully choose a sponsor, but also the potential sponsor must cautiously decide whether taking on a sponsee is prudent. I gave him the benefit of the doubt though. Mike was new at this. Hey now, Mike. I'm just another alcoholic willing to help you out. I'm not really in the right state of mind to sponsor anyone. Not until I rid my conscience of the one thing, anyway. Oh, okay. Don't feel bad, Mike. You're new. You'll catch on to how this works. Then I had the thought. One that might rid me of Mike for good. Ralph really helped me out. Maybe he'd be a good choice for you to consider. He won't be the same as you, Dan. You'd be surprised. We're all the same in one way or another. Promise me that you'll keep an open mind. Okay, anything for you, Dano. I hung up and texted directions to the meeting. Then I turned my phone back off. I decided on trying to catch a little nap after all, and so curled up on the couch in the reception area of my office. I drifted off almost immediately, but it didn't last long. I awoke screaming and in a cold sweat just 45 minutes later. I felt my face and realized that I'd been crying also. I dreamt of the one thing. Why had thoughts of it returned, and in such force? Damn Ralph. He brought it up and started pressing me. That would make sense. Although I had a feeling that Mike had something to do with it. Guilt over avoiding him? Constantly having to look over my shoulder and avoid phone calls? Or perhaps the fact that Mike had lost his daughter. I pushed the one thing to the back of my mind once again and decided to cross the street to McDonald's to get in at least one meal before that evening's meeting. I had to cross a 4-lane street in order to reach McDonald's. It was the middle of the afternoon, clear weather, and, being a Saturday, there was only light traffic. I absent-mindedly glanced in both directions and crossed, not bothering to walk the corner and wait for a signal. I was about halfway across when, seemingly out of nowhere, a car came racing at me. The driver was noticeably straddling the double-strip centre line of the road and overcorrected when he noticed me at the last moment. I could hear the tyres screech as the driver got back into his own lane and sped off. A drunk knew the signs when he saw another drunk driving under the influence. This guy was definitely drunk. Probably drinking in his car all morning and then falling asleep at the wheel after finally deciding to go home. I'd done it myself on many occasions. Even though I could have stayed home and drank contently and safely in the comfort of my living room, I would choose to sit at a park on some mornings and drink in my car. I thought of how strange the ritual was and how it was not unique to me. On any given morning, there would be a spattering of cars in each lot, all parked as far away from each other as a lot would allow, each car with a single occupant seemingly just sitting there. Every now and then, would glance over and catch the sight of a bottle being raised to the driver's lips. Fred, another guy from one of the meetings, would occasionally go down to the local park and work it. He'd walk around the lots and catch drunks, pretending that he had just been walking by and was looking to make conversation. Sometimes his presence was enough to make the drunk drive away. Sometimes they'd stay and talk. Sometimes they would even offer him a drink. Only twice, as far as I'm aware of, did Fred actually get a drunk to open up about his problem and agree to take Fred's advice. It might not have seemed like a lot, but that may have been 2 lives saved, plus countless others if you figured in the innocent lives a drunk might take along with himself on the highway to hell. I began to hyperventilate. I ran the rest of the way across the street and sat on the curb, my gorge rising. I tried to calm myself, but could not. Eventually, I threw up in the gutter. It wasn't the first time, but in the past, I'd always been drunk or hungover. I realized how pitiful I must have looked. I'd never seemed to care in the past. Eating was out of the question. I went back to the parking lot of my office, crossing the street with extra care this time, and got into my car. I drove straight to the church. I would be almost an hour and a half early, but that was okay. Someone was always there early to open up the rooms and make coffee. It was nice to show up and chat sometimes. Not surprisingly, Mike was already there when I arrived. He was sitting out in the parking lot, but remained in his car. It looked like he was dozing. I walked over and rapped on the driver's side window a few times. Mike startled, and he rolled down the window. "Danny, you're early. That's great." "Yep, couldn't wait to get here, Mike," I said sarcastically. "Tell you what, let's go around back and grab a bench." I led Mike behind the church. There was a small outdoor chapel of sorts, just a few benches facing a large wooden cross and overlooking a small stream. I motioned for Mike to take a seat and then sat down next to him. "Mike, let's talk." I felt surprisingly calm. I know that you're pretty new to the program, and this may be skipping ahead quite a bit, but let me explain how the 4th and 5th step of AA goes. They are, to me at least, probably the most important steps of all 12. They are where you begin healing. Sounds great, Dan. Not really. I did a really bad job on my 5th step. Remember how I told you that you're only as sick as your secrets? Mike nodded. Yeah, Danny. The 4th and 5th steps ask you to make a searching and fearless moral inventory, and then admit to God, ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. I can see where that would help. I have so much guilt and remorse, Danny. Sometimes I think it's what makes me drink. I shook my head. No, Mike, you drink because you're an alcoholic. But it's a whole lot easier to get sober when you get your head on straight. When you get rid of all that mess that's deep down inside, the stuff that regrets are made of. So, are we going to do that now? Not we. Me. I thought you already did your steps. I nodded. I did, Mike. I did. But the 4th and 5th steps are carried on throughout the rest. We have to continue to make a moral inventory and do those steps over and over because we are human. Just because we get sober doesn't make us saints. We still make mistakes. Mike nodded slowly and remained quiet. It was as if he knew that I was about to say something important, and it was time to keep his mouth shut. You see, Mike, there was something that I never admitted in my 5th step. Something that I couldn't admit. The one thing that I wasn't ready to give up. I don't know why, but it's catching up to me now. I'm afraid that if I don't let it go, I'm either going to drink or kill myself, or both. What is it, Dano? This is probably a mistake, telling a newcomer, especially about the one thing. In fact, this would be better left with a priest, but at this point, it doesn't matter because I'm going to have to own up to it. The one thing is something that everyone will find out about sooner or later. Probably sooner now. You can tell me, Danny. Your secret is safe with me. Suddenly, it was as if Mike had become the old-timer. His demeanour changed. He surely didn't seem like a newbie anymore. The whole way he was acting, he had gone from being an annoying, overexcited asshole to a quiet, comforting soul, at least in my heart. I took a deep breath. I've been sober for about 15 years, 1 month, 1 week and 4 days. I told you that I came into the rooms about 16 years ago though. Well, something happened about 6 months into that. I'd been dry, sure, but still an alcoholic, still exhibiting all the same behaviour. That's what the program is for, by the way. Not to make us stop drinking, but to make us saner, healthier people. Well, Mike, My breath hitched in my throat. I was already regretting bringing this up, but I felt it was too late now. Go on, Dano. I'm listening. It was late summer, around 7 o'clock dusk. I was driving up Parkside Avenue. You know the place. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I used to live in a cul-de-sac off Parkside. Then, you know the hill, about midways. Anyway, I was coming up over the crest of the hill, tooling along, pink clouding it, stone cold sober, mind you. A girl. A little girl, damn it. She came out from between 2 parked cars and just ran out in front of me. Oh God, Danny, no. Yeah, I couldn't stop it. I ran her down, Mike. A little girl. That's horrible, Mike grimaced. But it was an accident, Danny. You said so yourself. You were sober. She ran out from between the cars. You couldn't have known. No, but it was what I did next that was unforgivable. What, Dan? Mike rocked back, laced his fingers together, and knitted his brow. He had a clear-headed look about him, one that I had never seen on Mike's face before. What was unforgivable? I took a deep breath. I didn't stop. I just kept on driving. I panicked. It was like I'd been drinking. I didn't want to get caught. Afterward, I realized that it was a mistake. At the time, I just panicked. I acted just like a drunk would have. I left her there, Mike. Maybe she was still alive, but I left her there. What if she was just hurt and could have been saved if I had just stopped? She was dead the instant you hit her, Dan. You couldn't know that. I didn't know that, and I was there. I do know it, Danny. That's what the EMT said. Dead on impact. I jerked my head up. It was as if my stomach had dropped out from under me, like the first hill on a roller coaster. What did you say? When I got there, that's what the EMT told me. Dead on impact. She didn't suffer. She probably had no idea what had happened. What the hell are you talking about, Mike? She was my daughter, Danny. I was speechless. I sat still for a moment, and then started shaking my head violently. No, screw you, Mike. Her father is dead. I followed the story in the papers. He killed himself 2 months after the accident. Got drunk and drove into a bridge. Why the hell would you even say something like that? Mike had tears welling up in the corners of his eyes. Because now I know, Danny. Now I know that you are ready to free yourself of the one thing. Screw you, Mike. How can you pull something like this? How can you even say something like that? Do you think that this is a joke? I stormed away, sobbing, and walked toward the church. Ralph had arrived and was walking in himself. He noticed how upset I was and stopped me, grabbing my shoulder and turning me around somewhat forcefully. Danny, what's wrong? What's going on? That asshole. I told him, Ralph. I told him the one thing, and do you know what he said? Slow down, Danny, said Ralph. If you're ready, why don't you tell me what the one thing is first? My secret is no longer a secret. I told Ralph exactly what I told Mike. And he said that he's a father, that dick. Who, Danny? Who? Mike, that idiot who's been harassing me. Where is he, Danny? Is he here? I'll talk to him. I turned and pointed at the bench. He was sitting right there. Ralph cocked his head. Danny, are you okay? No, I'm upset, and with good reason. I just told him the one thing, and he goes out and says that." Ralph's brow wrinkled with concern. "Danny, I've been here for 20 minutes waiting for you to go inside. I saw you sitting there on the bench talking to yourself and thought that you were praying or needed some time to yourself. You were alone the whole time, Danny." I scanned the parking lot. No battered green Honda. I started to breathe heavily and pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my call log. All of the calls I had made and received, all of the texts, nothing. The only call in the last 3 days was the one I had made to Ralph that same morning. There was one message waiting in my inbox. It had no number associated with it. "I forgive you, Danny." Across the bridge, over the creek, and down to Beckford's Hollow. Mind your head and don't turn back. Lickety Split will follow. The call is about 1 in the morning. "I didn't know you were back in town." There's a pause. I don't have a number saved, but I recognize the voice. The slight stutter, the round vowels. "Sure, yeah, staying in my uncle's caravan park for a little while, till I'm back on my feet at least. How did you know I was here, that I was back?" Rain beats against the thin metal of the caravan. News travels an itch. Her concentration lapses for a second, as if she's seen something. "Don't you remember?" I do remember, at least some of it. I'm trying to organize my thoughts into something that might actually make sense, when a voice changes, grows lower, concerned. "You're okay though, right?" I don't know what she's asking about, if she's just checking up, or if she heard about my breakdown, about how I ended up chewing my lips until my pillows were brown and crusted with blood, staring at the ceiling until they had to break down my door. Maybe she's just being nice. "I'm fine, Blake. I'm all good." "Sure, swing by tomorrow, yeah? It'll at least give me something to do." She hangs up before I have a chance to respond. Good to know she hasn't changed. Still finding ways to get you to do what she wants. Little turns of phrase or actions that make us so hard to say no to. I wonder if she's changed as much as I have, if it affected her as much as it did to me, if she still has trouble sleeping. I hear it then, in the dark. Someone off in the distance singing it. Probably drunk on their way to the camp toilets or walking back from the pub. The same song that's been sung in this town since I was a boy, since my father was a boy. The verses change with the times, but the melody never changes. Lickety Split. My phone buzzes. A text. 1:28. "Make sure you come tomorrow. Have something to tell you. It's important." The drunkard gets closer, singing louder now, and I think they must have woken half the site up when they stagger and steady themselves against my caravan. The noise makes me jump, makes my heart start racing. They continue the song, losing the melody somewhere, but soldiering on regardless, words slurred. Under the branches, through the trees, the flower are a-touching. Watch your tongue and hold it now. Lickety Split is watching. It reminds me of how we'd sing it as children, in the playground, the woods, the creek. I wake early the next morning, wash my meds down with cold coffee from the night before, stretch. On the walk to the showers, I see that whoever was drunk had vomited just behind my caravan. Damn, real nice. It's dark, almost the colour of ink, and I can vaguely make out the shapes of lufberries, a small, dark berry that grew in the woods itch-bordered. I make a mental note to call my uncle, let him know. The walk to Blake's doesn't take too long, maybe half an hour, and it's nice to be out in the morning air. Despite the season, it's cold. Nips my exposed skin between my fingers, under my jaw. As I get closer, memories start to flood back. Half-formed things, after-school walks, our first cigarette. I ring the doorbell, stand back. Her house is huge, imposing, although empty. I studied the vines crawling up the side, the vast windows on the ground floor, the small windows of a room we used to open to smoke from. The top floor was her parents', although I guess now just a mother. It's hard to see, but for a moment, it seems as if there's something in the top window against the glass. Someone. I make eye contact with her mother, so much older than when I last saw her. Her hair a white mess, her cheeks sunken, eyes fixed on me. I want to look away and focus on the footsteps that I can hear coming to the front door, but I can't. I swear she's mouthing something to me or herself, and just as I'm trying to decipher what it is, Blake opens the door. Damn, Isaac. I'm lost for words. It's been so long. Red hair still a mess, glasses still perched so far down her nose, I'm not convinced she can see out of them at all. Her grin all teeth. Older though. For a moment I can see something in her eyes, a brief sadness. But she pushes through, pulls me into a hug. It's been so long. I hug her back. Too long. I know. I should have moved out by now. But since Mum got sick, she's been bedridden. Can't even get up to dress herself or go to the toilet. I'm cheaper than a nurse, right? Rent's cheap too. She smiles wide, but I can see she wanted to get this out of the way. That she had this prepared beforehand, maybe even rehearsed it, and that talking about it is painful. I think about mentioning her mother in the window, the words she was mouthing, but I decide against it. It must be hard enough already. In the same way my body still knew the hills and the turns of the town, it still knew her. We knew the rhyme of each other's conversations, of our jokes, our silences, and after 5 minutes, we're talking like old friends. She shows me into the kitchen, makes a cup of tea, offers me some food. We talk a while until she pauses, chewing her lip, concentrating on something. Then her mind springs into action all at once. Upstairs, I want to show you something. I don't say much, nod. This way. I leave my tea on the table, follow her. I have no idea what it is she wants to show me, what it could possibly be, but it must be important. She's acting different, no longer all jokes and smiles. The stairs groan underfoot, and the landing is bare. She gestures to a door. After you. I push it open, slowly, and take a second to absorb what's inside. Stacks of paper piled on the floor, on the tables. Plates of food and mugs of tea dotting the floor. Whiteboards covered in scribbles of black pen. Corkboards on the walls, huge and ancient books stacked under the tables. She moves through the mess with a practiced ease, picking her feet up just before they knock something over, bending at just the right time to avoid a stack. She turns to me. Look, I know it's a lot to take in, but I figured... Well, I don't know if there's a nice way to say this. I figured that you, out of anyone, would have a little more sympathy for all of this.